Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and John Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Welcome to our next series in the podcast. This is Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast. And the title for the session is an interesting one today. It's Communication, 2 Ears and 1 Mouth. And we are delighted to be welcoming our very special guest, Charlie Simpson. Now, Charlie is one of those wonderful individuals who does amazing work, but is very humble about telling us all the things he's done. So I'm going to give a little bit of background before we hand over to Charlie. Is that all right, Charlie?
If you must.
So Charlie draws on his experience as a barrister, a professional actor, and a communication specialist to help leaders craft messages that connect with target audiences, influence with integrity towards a common goal, moving people beyond information exchange to inspiring action and achieving desired outcomes. That sounds like a mouthful, but you're going to hear that unpack this wonderful combination of law, acting, and communications. We've had the pleasure of working with Charlie on some, I don't want to give the game away by telling you the kind of workshops
really important workshops.
Really important workshops.
You're going to really impactful workshops, and the feedback has just been awesome on those sessions.
Yeah, but
you'll see what we're talking about in just a moment.
But Charlie's, Charlie's expertise really is working with professionals in high profile, high pressure situations like negotiations for mergers and acquisitions or major AGMs and conferences. So Charlie brings this wonderful combination of skills to powerfully impact communications in the high profile situations where it matters. And before we go into anything else, I think we just want to welcome you properly, Charlie. Great to have you on the call. And I think for all of us, it'd be great to hear a little bit about the story that connects your legal acting and comms specialist background to the passion that you now have that's driving your focus. So, Charlie.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was kind of brought up in a family where there were a lot of lawyers, and as a young man with no imagination whatsoever, I found myself going into the law.
Yep.
And did that for about 4 or 5 years as a barrister, and that was quite good fun. But I kind of had a passion. Something I just needed to do, get out of my system, because there was some bizarre bit of me that thought I could earn my living as an actor, and I sort of needed to have a go, even if to be told, don't be ridiculous, go back to the bar. And it went quite well. I went to drama school for a year and ended up acting for about 15 years.
Wow.
Doing all sorts of stuff on the telly and in the theatre, and that was great until I got together with my lovely Juliet and we had some kids, and suddenly going on tour was no longer fantastic. In fact, it was horrible. I hated being away. And I met a wonderful man called Richard Garnett, through a friend. And he started talking to me about something called communication skills. And I said, what the heck are they? And he said, come and have a look. And that was back in 2003. And for the last 20 years, I've been sort of obsessed with this business of how human beings connect with each other, how they influence each other, how they build relationships.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there that's, there's a lot of dysfunctionality when it comes to relationships out there. And I suppose I've got a passion for people being able to connect.
Well, that's exactly what we wanted.
Sorry?
I was going to say that's exactly what we wanted to pick up on, because that's the Charlie that we know. That passion for getting people to connect in all sorts of spheres. So tell us a bit more about that passion. What does that passion look like today?
Well, what does it look like today? It looks like, as I said, for the last 20 years or so, I've been working. So from a business perspective, I've been working with lots of different kinds of clients, and in a corporate context. At a very high level, what this involves is there's a sort of virtuous circle, I think, that goes on in terms of one human being's ability to connect with and influence another human being. There's a sort of initial stage where you're just building chemistry. You're trying to establish your credibility, of course, and demonstrating that you're competent and that you're of good character and you're going to behave properly and not mess people around. But there's also this kind of chemistry thing, which is interesting. How quickly can you, it's a slightly superficial phrase, but how quickly can you turn a stranger into a friend?
Yeah.
How quickly can you, anyone can do it over a sustained period of time, build trust, but actually, what does it take to in a shorter period of time as possible to have someone going, yeah, I trust you. There's something about you that no, I can work with you, and it's that's interesting. And then, and by the way, the essence of that, I think, is to do with getting the conversation from a head-to-head conversation into a gut-to-gut conversation as quickly as possible. It's very hard to build chemistry just at a rational level. It's that thing of we like to think we make rational decisions. I think most of the time we make emotional decisions and then we post-rationalize them.
Oh, 100%. Make it emotionally and then justify it with all the logic. But the decision was made a long time ago.
Completely. So there's something about that thing of how can I get this, even in the early moments, how can I get this into a gut-to-gut thing? Is it about having a conversation? Oh, I've walked into this person's office and there's a photograph of some kids on that. It's as cheesy as that, if you like. It doesn't matter. They're going to love talking about their kids. So if you can see a picture, oh, you've got kids, and away you go. Now, it's not always going to work, but the general principle is try and get it gut to gut as quickly as you can, because that's where you'll build a little bit of chemistry.
But I guess most people or some people are nervous of that because they sense it might be being disingenuous, or you're just trying to just try it. You're obviously going for something which isn't naturally there.
John, that's I completely follow that, and that's that. There's something about all communications, really communication skills. There's a graphic that I sometimes use, which I call the integrity iceberg, and I coach kind of techniques and tools and ways of thinking that are the tip of the iceberg. There's a T for tools at the top, above the surface. Below the surface, there's the vast majority of the iceberg, which has a huge I for integrity. If you don't fundamentally care, if you don't actually want to build a relationship with this person, then I'm going to see that.
Yeah.
So in terms of in those early moments, trying to get gut to gut, you can have the conversation about the children. If you're doing it in a manipulative way, where actually you don't care and you're just using it as a manipulative tool, I'll see it. Yeah. The danger is I'll see it.
Yeah.
But if you say to yourself before the meeting or the encounter, whatever it is, I want to get to know this person. I want to build a relationship. It matters. Then actually, whether you're talking about the kids or the fact that there's a crash helmet in the corner, you go, oh, you into motorbikes or whatever it might be. No. So long as you actually care, because you're there to build a relationship, there's something you want to do, then that's fine.
Yeah, that authenticity.
That's so powerful as a like a base level for building relationships, and that's just the space that we love to hang out. I remember the chairman of a company I worked with many years ago always said, "Care more than others think you should."
Yes.
Care. If you start there, what you build after that, you'll never go wrong. Care more than others think you should. Yeah.
And I think that principle of caring applies right round this virtuous circle. So so there's an initial kind of chemistry building thing in terms of building long-term trusted relationships. And then having built a little bit of initial trust, you've almost sort of earned the right to now go to the next stage. And the next stage, I think, is understanding who it is. Because, very, very old-fashioned metaphor, but the better that the doctor diagnoses, the better they can prescribe. So the more that you know and can understand what is really going on here with this human being, that's clearly the next stage. What's the skill there? Well, clearly it's listening. You don't get to understand people by you doing all the talking. You get to understand people when you shut up and actually listen to them. I suppose this is the area that I'm absolutely fascinated by. I think listening, it's a very old-fashioned metaphor. I think listening is the sort of Cinderella of communication skills, largely in the basement ignored. But when listening comes to the party, it just makes an amazing impact. And perhaps we can talk about that a little bit more. But the skill, and it is a skill, of being really good at listening. And by listening, as perhaps we can explore, I don't mean just not talking, absorbing content. That's not listening.
Well, that's where we came up with the title, right? Communication, 2 ears and 1 mouth, for a reason.
Absolutely. And everyone's heard that phrase. They should be used in those proportions. I would argue they should probably be used actually 80-20. So that would be 4 ears to 1 mouth.
Maybe we should rename it. Maybe that's 4 ears, 1 mouth.
Oh yeah, listen with your ears, listen with your heart, listen with your gut, and then
there you go. There you go. So there's a fascinating piece around listening.
Yeah.
Having done some listening and understood who it is that you're trying to build a relationship with, certainly in a corporate context, you'll go away and think and do some solving, and then you'll come back and you'll articulate a proposition of some sort. There is, of course, a skill set there. That's a coin that has 2 sides to it. There's the content, the words that actually come out of your mouth, and if you're using slides and stuff, there's the slides as well. And then there's the flip side of that, of course, is the impact. How do you come across as a human being? Both of those are super important. From a content perspective, it's all about the curse of knowledge. So often it's people who are experts, and they just kind of vomit their information at their audience. And the audience is sat there going, so what do you really want me to understand? And why is this insightful? Why does this matter to me? They haven't put their content through their audience's me filter. Right. We probably haven't got time to talk about that enough today. But it comes back to your care word. They haven't thought in a sophisticated way sufficiently about where their audience is now and where they're trying to shift them to.
I think that me filter that you mentioned.
I just made a note of that as well. I think it's worth unpacking that a little bit.
I think we should stay there, because for relationships, anybody you're relating to, being aware that they process things through their me filter will help you build that relationship better. So why don't you tell us, just camp out there a little bit. We have time.
Okay. So the me filter. So one of the things that I do with people, I suppose, at the end of the day, we're all obsessed with our own kind of world, our own universe of me.
We're all selfish.
Well, that's what we say.
Basically, yes.
Talk about the phone and the camera, the pictures. That's the example you use in the workshop. You know, the example you use with giving somebody the phone and the pictures.
Oh yes, yeah. That's right. So you know, if you've got an old school photo and you haven't seen it for zillions for ages and ages, and you find it in a drawer covered in dust, and you take it out and you unroll it, and there's the old class. Where do your eyes go first?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's Fred and there's Mary or whatever it may be. But fundamentally, where am I? And if we'd been to the same party and I said, no, I've got some pictures, you'd do this. You'd go, yeah. Oh, there I am. You'd be slightly longer on that one. So we've got this me filter. We're obsessed with our universe. And if you're the audience and I'm an expert and I'm going to talk to you about my expertise, the huge temptation is that I will just go, let me already tell you all my clever stuff, blah, 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 because it's very clever. And it is very clever. And I've invested a huge amount of time in acquiring all that knowledge and content. But the challenge is that, you know, what proportion of that is actually deeply relevant to you?
Yes.
And are you sat there going, oh, well, this is very clever, but why are you, so what? So the challenge for the speaker is always to put their content through their audience's me filter. And ask, it's the same thing as asking the so what question. Why should they care? Are you very clear in your preparation? Whatever it is that you're saying, are you very clear why you are saying this to this audience at this particular moment in time?
Yeah.
And I would argue that this rule applies, ironically, or sort of, what's the word? Perversely, in a way, this rule applies the more clever the content is.
Yes.
Because the more clever it is, the more the person articulating it is going to be tempted to go, well, this is very clever. So,
and I am very clever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a very, very simple little tool which I always tell people to do if they kind of go, well, how do I work out, Charlie, what's insightful to them? I say, well, take a piece of paper or a screen or whatever, or a whiteboard, 3 columns, think, feel, do, TFD, and then write the word now, and then have a conversation with your colleagues or in your own head, whatever. Where are they now from a thinking, feeling, and doing perspective? Intellectually, where are they? What are they already thinking about, whatever it is you're going to be talking about? Where are they emotionally? Are they secure? Are they insecure? Are they naive, cynical? They're human beings. You're walking into an emotional state, whether you like it or not. And then what are they doing or not doing in relation to whatever it is you're talking about? And you kind of brainstorm that. And for a really big pitch, you could brainstorm that, and with a panel of people you're presenting to, you might do that exercise for each member of the panel. You could spend half a day debating and discussing. It's conceptually very simple, but actually you could have a very sophisticated conversation within that simple little model. Having done the now, you then do the same exercise, but this time you put to be. What do I want them to be thinking, feeling, doing at the end of the encounter, presentation, whatever it may be? And when you do that, it's kind of now and to be, by definition, you are forcing yourself to put your content through their me filter.
Love it. And actually, as I'm sitting listening to you there, Charlie, I'm thinking a number of our listeners out there will also be thinking, how can I use this stuff at home? If I need to get through to my partner, how can I use this stuff with them as well? It absolutely applies.
Well, I love what you said a while ago, that whenever you're walking into a situation in a relationship, whether it's a boardroom or an individual, you're walking into people in an emotional state.
Yes.
We like to forget that we're humans with emotions, and we're all, grown-ups in a business environment. But we're humans in an emotional state.
And Charlie said, where are they now, and where would I like them to be at the end of this conversation?
Love it.
So powerful.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff around content, the spoken word content. If you're seeking to influence people and seeking to build relationship and trust with them, are you putting your content through their me filter? Because if you haven't done that, you're likely to be eroding trust rather than building trust.
For sure.
And then in terms of impact, in terms of how you come across as a human being, there's a bunch of stuff around making sure that your body language and your voice are doing what you want them to do when you're under pressure. And so there's a bunch of stuff around that. And assuming you do that really well, this persuading piece, the speaking piece, then there's a consequence of some sort. In the corporate universe, someone buys the product or the service or whatever it is. There's a win-win. Somebody makes money, somebody else gets the product or service. And what gets reinforced? The trust. Because there was a good bit of chemistry building at the beginning, and I sort of went, I can deal with this person. Then they shut up and listened to me, and they deeply understood what my challenge was. They went away, they thought about it, they came back, they articulated a proposition that was deeply relevant to me, and I got it and went, yes, let's do that. There was a consequence. It was a mutual win-win. And so that virtuous circle just goes round and round. And that's the sort of communication universe that I love playing around in.
And we love hearing you talk about it. There's just so many things we could unpack from that.
Well, we see the power, obviously, in mergers and acquisitions, these high pressure, high stakes environments that you work in, situations that you work in. But because of the work that we do, John and I see such strong parallels with a relationship, or even a challenged relationship, a domestic relationship, a couple relationship. Have you used any of this in like a couple's context that could help bring it alive for listeners in, thinking about it in a personal relationship context?
Yes. I mean, I think in a family context and in a social context, if I may come back to the listening piece, for me, in a family context and a social context, the presentation skills bit where but the listening piece is just absolutely huge. I'll never forget quite early on in our marriage. I've been with Juliet for about 30 years now, and but relatively early on in our
congratulations. Let's not let that disappear.
No, well, I'm a very, very lucky man, and most of the people I know cannot understand why Juliet wants. Anyway, there we are. We spent some time with a couple who obviously stay nameless, but they were going through a divorce, and it was very sad to watch two sets of lawyers basically driving them apart. And of course, I should say immediately that I think the law has moved on significantly. There are many more lawyers now that are more inclined to try and help it, but that wasn't happening in this instance. And it was just so sad, really, to see this. There was no listening going on. Nobody was trying to understand the other side's perspective because they saw that as somehow weakness. And it was just, and we ended up, in fact, in a very amateur way, trying to help this couple. And we met with them separately, and anyway, tried to help them to get through it. The saddest thing was, of course, is when the adults get driven apart like this, the impact on the children.
Yeah, always. Yeah,
just horrible. And so that was a really powerful experience for Juliet and I, and it got me sort of thinking about this whole listening thing. And then Richard, my business partner, who was actually onto this earlier, said, "Well, go and have a look at Stephen Covey's chapter on listening in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People." And I read that and found that fascinating. And so we just started really, really thinking about this whole business of listening. And I think we realized that it's, as I said earlier, it's a Cinderella. I mean, it is staggering, really, when you think about. You ask anyone whether they've ever received any presentation skills courses, and the answer is yeah. At school, even at school, we do. What do? Show and tell, and we have to stand up and talk, and that's regarded as really important. And then you get into the work environment, and you have to do presentations and all. And it's all about this. It's all about standing up. And then you ask people how many hours they've spent in a room thinking about how they can be the best possible listener that they can be. And the answer is usually a round number.
0. Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in education. Maybe it does now. I mean, I'm ancient.
Young man.
Maybe they're doing it now. I don't know. But why isn't there any? Isn't it part of our education to understand what it means to listen? Because it is a skill.
Yeah.
And couldn't the world benefit from that right now? Just the skill of listening deeply to hear what the real issue behind the issue is, so we can have a better conversation about what really matters.
My mind is drawn back to that couple you spoke about that you helped back in the day. What part did listening play in that, in helping them sort of navigate their journey forward?
Well, I mean, I'm not too. I don't want.
Fair enough.
That's difficult to articulate, and I obviously don't want to get into any detail.
Yes,
there.
can't give away privacy.
It was very clear that everybody on the two sides, both the couple and their kind of allies and families, respective families. It was just this, and it was they, and you, and and nobody was just going, well, let me just try and understand your perspective here.
Yeah.
Even if I don't agree with it, at least I can try to understand it. I don't have to agree with it.
Yeah.
I just need to at least. I watched your lovely friend Lindbert.
Yes.
Oh yes.
The podcast with Lindbert.
Talking about inclusive leadership, and I wrote something down where he spoke about inclusive leadership enables people to feel respected, trusted, safe, and valued.
Yeah.
And listening is absolutely fundamental to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can't. And yet, what do we think of as so often as leadership?
Talking and directing. Yeah.
I'm in charge. Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
I think there's something fascinating about what I often ask myself the question: why don't we? Why isn't? We all say listening's so important. Of course it is. All the books say parenting skills. We know if not number one, then number two skill is listening to children. Everybody talks about it, and yet it doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah.
And I often ask myself the question: why? What is it that stops us listening?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the greats do. I have to say, I'm always impressed when I read some of the stories of some of the great listeners. When they're new in position, new in post, they will take sometimes 6 months, 9 months, a year, just listening. Say, I'm new in here, guys. You tell me, you've been here before. There's some stuff,
Completely.
probably some stuff we're going to need to change, but let's at least find out where we are first. That listening is just so important.
So what's your answer, Charlie? What have you come up with as the reasons why we don't listen well, or we think we've listened by just talking about we should listen? We think we've done the job.
Well, I mean, look, it's a complicated question, and I'm no academic on these things, but I've already mentioned education. The fact that it's not part of our education in a way that I think it could be much more a part of our education. But there's a sort of unholy trinity that I sometimes think about.
Mm-hmm.
I think ego, which we've already spoken about, me.
Yeah.
We just and again, it's not a criticism because we're all trying to survive fundamentally.
Yeah.
The only reason we're kind of just focused, we're trying to survive, and life's tough, and it's ups and downs, and we're trying to get to our metaphorical heaven, and we're trying to avoid our metaphorical hell, whatever. And so we filter everything through that, and we're sort of obsessed with ourselves. So I think that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Certainly in a corporate context, time, and actually at the home for that matter.
Yeah.
With parents who are working very, very hard.
Yeah.
I just haven't got the time. I've got other stuff I've got to do, and I haven't got the time to sit and listen because it's not perceived to be as important as it should be.
Yeah.
So therefore, it gets sacrificed. And then I think the third element, which is perhaps a bit more contentious, and I'm no psychologist, but I wonder if the third element isn't fear.
Yeah.
And I think back to I was sent away to school many years ago into an environment where basically emotion was perceived to be weakness. Thank goodness, I think education has moved on a lot since those days. But certainly in my day, in my generation, emotion was often seen as weakness. Come on, buck up your eye. You'll be all right. Go stiff upper lip and all that sort of stuff. And so when actually these young people grew into adults, the whole thing of emotion was like really unfamiliar territory.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a sadly died a little while ago now, but my stepdad, very bright, he was a High Court judge, very bright man, and he we had a disagreement about something, and then as we were sort of making up afterwards. I've never forgotten the moment where we made up and had a hug and everything else, and then he said, "Charlie, something I need to tell you that perhaps you don't realize just how frightened of emotion I am."
Wow.
And that really, really stuck with me. And I started to think about it in terms of my listening coaching, and I coach a lot of very, very alpha people, and actually I wonder if one of the reasons they don't listen is because. Well, as we can discuss, listening is about following, not imposing.
Right.
You are following their agenda, not imposing your own. And if you are listening properly, you are ceding control. You are saying, I don't need to be in control. I'm going to follow them where they go. And for a lot of people, that's a frightening is a strong word, but it can be unsettling and uncomfortable. To cede control and just to follow. Let's see where they go, because who knows where they may go.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people who, dare I say, like to be in control, it's an intimidating thing to cede control and say, no, I'm just going to follow. And wherever they go is wherever they go. And I think that fear, at the mild end or the stronger end, depending on the situation, is also part of why we don't listen.
That is such a powerful point for us to all grab hold of. Because, of course, when you have fear mixed with ego, especially if you're a leader or the expectations are that you should know the answer or you should be in control, not doing that is both a discomfort for you personally, but also a discredit for you in your role or in how you think others will perceive you. And the two together can be a very potent cocktail of it's easy to just shut it down, not listen and tell, rather than open up and be vulnerable. Very, very powerful.
There is so much that we could talk to you about, Charlie. It's so good to talk. It's probably better for us to be it's wonderful for us to be listening to you. There's just so much that we're taking away from this. I
am acutely aware of the fact that I'm doing far too much talking and not enough listening. But anyway,
that's because the title of this podcast is 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so we have to. No, you're sharing such wealth that we know our listeners absolutely want to hear, and it will probably be helping to unblock some of the challenges people are feeling in relationships right now. Because of course, if you're feeling the fear, your fight or flight will kick in, which will shut down your ability to listen well or to show any empathy, and that creates a very downward spiral of distress rather than opening up empathy and compassion. So we could dwell for the whole session on listening. We might need to have you back.
Might need to have you back to unpack some more of this good stuff.
But we probably know the answer to this. But the last question we want to ask is, what has been the best relationship advice that you've received?
Especially given the journey that you've been on.
Given the journey you've been on.
Moved from where you started to where you are now. It'd be really interesting to unpack that. Well, not unpack, but get a sense for that.
And with that, what do you want to pass on? If you could only pass on one thing to the next generation, what would that be?
Oh, to the next generation, huge. That's obviously a huge.
Well, your loved ones, to somebody.
Message to the world.
I mean, if I was going to put, as far as communication skills, face-to-face communication skills are concerned, if there was one phrase that I think sits, or one of the phrases that sits up there at 50,000 feet, that can be unpacked in loads of different ways across all the different communication skills, it would be just to keep asking yourself the question, have I stepped into their shoes?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Do I understand what is going on? Have I stepped into their shoes from a listening perspective? And by the way, let's be clear that listening is not just. There's a lot of people who when I ask people, what's the definition? How would you define the word to listen? The most common response is, well, I don't talk and they do, so I'm sort of absorbing their content.
Yeah.
And obviously we can do that badly, i.e. ignoring. So the example I always give is when Juliet and I, when our son Sebastian was about 3 months old and it was 3:00 in the morning and he was in the next door bedroom screaming his little heart out, and Juliet and I were in the next door room, both wide awake, facing in opposite directions. And I was thinking, I did the last one, she can do this one. And she was thinking, I do it all day, he can do 2 in a row. From Sebastian's point of view, he was being ignored. And then there's kind of, and on that scale, then good listening would be when somebody goes into a room to hear what their bonus is going to be once a year.
Very good listening at that point.
They'll probably listen quite attentively to what they're being said.
But
the point is, but people define listening as the ability to absorb content, either badly or well.
Yeah.
And that's fine, so long as the human being is telling the truth. And the problem is that we don't always tell the truth. Very often for perfectly good reasons. Andrea, if we were workmates and we knew each other quite well and bumped into each other on Monday morning, and you'd had a horrible weekend, not good at all, and I said, hey, Andrea, how was your weekend? What would you say?
Fine.
Fine is the correct word. That's what everybody would say, fine.
It was fine.
And that's great, because you don't want a conversation about your horrible weekend.
Yeah.
And actually, it suits me, because I don't want a conversation with you about your horrible weekend either. So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
but the point is, if you're building relationship, there's a time and a place when you're going to want to go beyond the world of fine.
Yeah.
You're going to have to.
You can't build trust when you're in fine territory.
Yeah.
Sitting underneath the word fine is some very complex, sophisticated thing that I call stuff. There's a load of stuff underneath fine.
Yeah.
And in the building of any relationship, whether it's in the home or socially or in the workplace, you're going to need to go beyond the world of fine and get into the stuff. And that's what great listeners do. They do what I would call empathetic listening. Mm-hmm. Empathy, obviously, being the ability to step into somebody else's shoes and go, oh, that's how you see the world.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And for them to feel that you genuinely feel how they feel.
Yeah.
That's the game, and that's a skill set. But it's stepping into their shoes. Mm. And listening is just it's the preeminent skill for the ability to step into somebody else's shoes in order to build relationship. And awesome. And then yes, there's the speaky piece and putting your content through their me filter, but it starts with listening. So if you ask me to one thing, step into their shoes.
Step into their shoes and listen. I mean, you say you heard Lindbergh's talk, and Lindbergh described himself as a one-trick pony, where he said, doesn't matter what the question is, the answer is inclusion. I think for yourself, what we're hearing loud and clear is the answer is listening. If you're in challenging situations, listen. Yeah. It's just such an important thing to do. So I wouldn't say one trick pony. I would say specialist, guru, expert in the space. And we've seen it. We in the work that we've done together, seen it come through so many times.
Yeah.
I suppose the only just to be, I think it's important to say we live in a world where there's some incredibly complicated and complex stuff going on, and I don't want to sound naive. Because, of course, when you've got really dreadful situations, listening to the other side is a desperately difficult thing to do. But it's what has to happen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're agreeing.
Well, thank you for making that point again. Absolutely, 100%.
And I love the way you said it's, the empathetic listening. What does it fit? Are you understanding their perspective? Can you really say you're standing in their shoes? And the way we like to kind of sum that up is that listening isn't just to understand. It's listening until the other person feels understood.
Brilliant.
And so
it's listening until the other person is certain, it feels confident that you understand them.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we stop short quite often with listening. Actually, we stop short just with the content bit and not really understanding what life feels like in their shoes. Charlie, we're unfortunately going to have to wrap it up there. There is so much more that we would love to unpack with you. But thank you so much. Love the passion. We can see it oozing through. We love doing those workshops with you on emotionally intelligent listening because, we have that's a real heartbeat between us, something that really matters to relationships and seeing relationships done well. But if people wanted to hear more from you or see more of your work, where could they go? What could they look at?
We're a very we're a very small organization. There's a website, gsbcoms.co.uk, gsbcoms.co.uk.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Really, and I get all my work through word of mouth, really. So I'm afraid you won't find lots of marketing or anything out there because what I do is it's about chemistry and trust, and so it's all about word of mouth.
Yeah, and we have to add in there that you do it not just nationally but internationally, because you've been known to do work with government officials and leaders of nations. So if anybody out there needs help with some of the very sticky situations we have going on around the world, Charlie's your man. He'll help you listen well.
Great in that space. It's been a delight, a privilege having you with us, Charlie. Really, really good. Maybe we can sneak another one in another time and have you back to come and unpack some more listening for us, because I'm sure our leaders would really value that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great to chat.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.